All right. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Very excited to have a good friend of mine, Tim Lindsey, who's an originating branch manager with CrossCountry Mortgage up in the Denver area. Tim is an absolute beast of a producer. He does well over 100 million a year, runs an amazing branch, has an unbelievable team. And I've had the privilege of knowing Tim for 2.5 years now. So Tim, thank you for taking the time to come on the show here today.
Of course, Jeff. I really appreciate you, making the opportunity, and love that you asked me to be on here. It's very exciting to participate in this. So I love what you're doing. This is great.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Well, a little birdie told me that you are a wine connoisseur, and you've got a wine collection. Is that true?
It's true. Yeah, this was my COVID hobby, if you will. I really didn't know a whole lot about wine, and during 2020 when we were having our refi boom, was working 6 days a week and going through just massive hours at the office, and needed something to take my time off on Sundays when there was no baseball or NCAA basketball going on. So I started trying out some different Napa wines, found out that they didn't seem really that expensive, bought some that maybe were a couple $100, only to discover later that they had been discounted because they couldn't sell into restaurants that were closed. And so I wound up enjoying wines that now sell for $500, $600 a bottle. So I was like, well, I can't drink those. So stuff some of that stuff away. And yeah, but I would say mainly Napa cabs. And I'm just, we're trying some different stuff out, and I'm really enjoying it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm an avid wine drinker.
Excellent.
Not as much of I don't have a collection because I drink it too fast to actually collect any of it. It all goes down the pipe once I get it. But I love red wine. What's have you added anything to your collection recently?
Just in Napa a couple weeks ago. So unfortunately or fortunately, as you arrive back here, about a few weeks later, boxes of wine start showing up, and you're thinking, I don't remember participating in that, probably because of some wine drinking I was doing there. But if you can make it that way, Heights Cellar is a really good wine. It's not one of these super expensive, but they've got some really good stories behind their wines. Yeah. I think their 1974 Martha's Vineyard was what put Napa on the map in France. And so, they've really built a good reputation from that point on, and just really good wines. We've got some of that. There's La Jolla is a pretty powerful one. It's actually in the Kendall Jackson family, but it's some of the higher end stuff, and you need an appointment to get on their land. Like it's a whole project. And then you taste the wine and you understand why it's such a project to get into there. So yeah, I would say it's definitely one of my favorites.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to check those out. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're delicious.
Yeah, I love red wine. I like big reds. Big Napa cabs. Tends to always be what we gravitate toward. I like my wife Danielle likes more fruit forward, but somehow we seem to land together on like the bigger wines. But I also like some dry Italian wines with the right meal. Those are good as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm a tannin guy myself. The fruit is good, but I really like having that dryness in the mouth. I think it's good, but definitely let it decant for a while and still get some of that fruit early on, so it's not overly tannin. So I agree and I think you can find both of those in some of the Italian wines for sure. I'm guessing some up north, maybe. Are you thinking Piedmont range or in Italy? Like, do you know what region?
No, I can't even go that deep.
That was the only region I knew, so I was throwing that out there. So like Piedmont, that's all I know.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's cool. Well, this is good to know. We're gonna have to follow up some more on this because there's some information I can learn from you there. Definitely. What got you into the mortgage business originally?
Yeah, so in 2001, I went back to school to finish up my bachelor's degree. Somehow snuck my way into Northwestern in Chicago. So met some really interesting and smart people there. That's how I know I snuck in, because they were the smart people, but I was sneaky salesperson, right? So started in political science. My intention was to try to go off to law school, maybe be an attorney. Because I really enjoyed Law and Order, and I figured that must be the way things go, right? It's just you just done, and off you go, right? So,
yeah, exactly. Slam a gavel down, and yeah.
That's right. Like, oh, good, I win.
Yeah,
I'm a millionaire. So I had spent a couple of years in political science, started taking some business courses, had one course that was done by a stock trader who'd been at the board of trade in Chicago. And he was just had high energy and was super fun, made jokes all the time, was always drawing on the board about like traders are nuts, but really got into understanding some of the market stuff and really started leaning more like I really liked that. Well, one of the political science people that was one of my classmates had been a real estate agent in San Francisco for a while. And she was married to a broker, mortgage broker in Chicago. And one day she sat me down. She's like, I really think you should talk to my husband. I think you like the markets. You're fascinated by politics. And I think that this job would incorporate both. And so he was a pretty busy guy. They were coming through that refi boom from the 2001, 2002 recession, coming out of some of that tech bust, and didn't really want to talk to me. I was 29. He was probably pushing 40. Didn't know if I was serious, and took a few minutes. I think he wanted to impress me. So he said, I'm going to give you 30 minutes on my of my time. So 8 o'clock Sunday morning, I'll be down on my boat in Lake Michigan. I was like, okay. So my butt was there 10 minutes early, and went on his boat. He showed me it's not sexy, but he showed me a $10,000 check. And I was like, is that what you're making monthly? And he laughed at me and he said, son, that's what I make per file. And I was like, excuse me? So that was it. I was sold. Signed me up. So that's really how I got into it. Finished up my degree at Northwestern, which had bothered me for a while, but really didn't know how I would use politics in this. And then I learned about treasuries and the Fed and how all that plays into it, and realized I use it every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I really got into it.
Yeah. And then like getting into it, was it completely different than what you expected? What did you like about it, as you started to get into your career?
One of the questions I asked, his name was Dan Kaz. One of the questions I asked Dan on the boat was, at what point do you think this really gets boring? And he was like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And I thought, well, I just don't like, you're giving people mortgages. They're doing like writing applications. Like, how long will it take me to not be bored? And he was like, it's going to change every day. And so I really dove into that initially. And by the way, he was 100% accurate. I wish I was bored some days.
Yeah, right.
In my career, but I think I even forgot the question you asked me.
Yeah, just like what did you enjoy most about it as you were? Yeah,
that's it. I think that the fact that it's new every day. There are similar things, but there's so many different aspects of what's going on. Whether you're having to dive into a origination, helping someone with buying this property that they didn't ever think they could own, and how are they going to make those mortgage payments, to when they call back 4 or 5 years later and like, we're upgrading, right, to this next home. And you're thinking, I remember our conversations like, I can't buy a house. And now you're moving on to these next levels. I really enjoyed that right out of the gate. Chasing realtors, one of my friend, Lexus, who had recommended I talk to Dan, had told me that summer, like, you've got to go meet 500 real estate agents that summer. That was my tack from Memorial Day to Labor Day, if I said that right. And I did it. I went to 20, 30 open houses every single weekend and collected 500 business cards face to face.
Wow.
At the beginning, I didn't like it. And after a few weeks, you just kind of get into the rhythm and you're thinking, this is great. So I really enjoyed that. I would say I struggled a little bit because I didn't know. I would memorize what the 30-year fix was on a Friday and memorize it to go in. And now I realize, like, you're just like, people just want to understand, like, where are we at? Not like it's 3.25 with a 6-point buy down, right? So 6-point buy down, good Lord.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Well, that might be the case today. Actually.
Yeah. It probably is.
So that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. 500 agents from Memorial Day to Labor Day. I think that's awesome. Like, one of the things that, I think people don't realize in sales, whether it's a real estate agent or loan officer or really any other type of small business, whatever, it takes a massive amount of contact and effort to generate sales. Like, that's a shitload of agents that's a shitload of people to meet in that period of time. And it's a massive amount of effort you have to put in to make those contacts. And this is all about developing relationships and making a ton of contacts.
Right. I mean, the rule of thumb is for every 100 calls, you get 10 leads, and 10 leads, you get one deal. And so you start thinking, shit, I need thousands of these contacts, right? And just like, and to grow and to grow and to grow. And it never really ends.
Yes.
Right. It just goes on for the entire career. And as long as you just push, you're going to be okay. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing how different you were mentioning this earlier, how different every transaction can be that we do. I've been in the business for 16 years. I'm still constantly running into situations that I've never run into before, financial predicaments that people are in, or documents they can't get, or a situation that comes up. You're constantly solving problems. It's just amazing how I guess I don't know, in the back of my mind, I keep thinking, well, at some point, I'm going to have run into every scenario, but I still haven't hit that point. I guess you just never hit that point. It's weird.
No, well, as soon as you think you do, then all of a sudden 2020 March, COVID hits and you got markets going up and down, liquidity's bailing, jumbo loans are gone, and you're all of a sudden you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Right? Just like it was back in 2008, and you're thinking, okay, I went through this once, but this is way different. And this one's on steroids because it's moving so fast.
Yeah.
And to your point, that means there's something else coming too. So as soon as you start getting complacent, whack, right, in comes life to make sure you're awake.
Every time.
Well,
so for people who don't know, you're a super successful originator. You're one of the top LOs in the country. You've had incredible success in the industry. What to you defines success? Like when you're thinking about being successful, what does that look like for you?
So I think it's had different layers or stages throughout my career. I think early on, I saw this $10,000 check and thought I could do that. And then came up with this idea, like I'm going to have a $10,000 Friday on payday, right? And then it was going to be, I'm going to have a $20,000 Friday. And for a very long time, that was sort of my goal. I came from a place where we really didn't have a ton of money. My parents, marriage fell apart, and then the money was gone. My dad died broke. Like it's sort of that I needed to have this kind of money moving forward. So I don't think that's me.
That's me.
From there on, it became more about production, competing with other people to make sure that I was producing what I needed to do based on what other people's expectations were, and kind of outgrew that as well. I got into a place now where I'm in a situation now where I'm trying to teach other people to be better loan officers, be better people, not necessarily coaching directly, but as I'm hiring loan officers and trying to coach them up for that. I think that's where I'm really starting to see success, is when I tell somebody something and then later on they're having a conversation, they're sharing the information that I shared because it's finally clicked in the understanding. So I would say my success is actually changing currently into that role where it's not so much about the money or the volume anymore. I mean, that's super important, obviously, especially if I'm going to coach other people, they need to see it. But I think it's more about watching other people now become successful as we train the next generation of loan officers, if you will.
Yeah, that's cool. That was my computer going off there. We'll be able to edit that part of it out. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to wonder what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Reset on that part of it. Okay. So that's awesome. Paying it forward and helping other people achieve that level of success, what does that do for you personally? Like, what do you enjoy the most out of that?
There's a weird calming effect that it has on me when, especially even on my team, as I'm trying to teach people to read guidelines, dive deeper into it. Even today we're having a conversation like, well, they said this probably won't work. And I was like, well, then who did you ask after that? Right. Kind of get through this whole, like, we don't want to be overly pushy or bully-ish, but we do, right? Because I think there's a solution here and we want to help people get into homes. And so there's a calming effect when I can see these things happening around me and I don't have to physically get involved every single time like I used to.
Yeah.
And I think that helps me internally as a human just find that, not peace, but something that I'm searching for as far as like, hey, I'm going to be 50 in a couple of years. I better start figuring out how not to have a heart attack. And that's helping for sure.
Yeah. Tim, yeah. So you're 48, Tim?
I'll be 48 in July.
You look great you look young for your age, dude. I feel like we're the same age.
Thank God.
Yeah.
I got some weird gene that was passed down. My family did something right. And I don't know what it was. I'm sure it was, we signed something with the devil.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's not Botox, so you can tell because I got these little bags on there. Yeah. If I had Botox, that would be done.
Yeah. Well, you can say the Botox for down the road a little bit and then lean on that then.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think there is something about being able to help people achieve something that's really exciting to be part of that process. It's funny, when I was younger, anytime I took, like, you know how they have those career tests when you're younger, you're trying to figure out, like, well, what should I do? You know, you're in
Yeah.
high school and you take those different tests to tell you, like, oh, you're best suited for this type of job. Anytime
I think most of us got janitor though, right?
yeah.
Was it just me?
Yeah. Well, what I would always get is priest or pastor. And I am not a religious person, which is the funniest thing. I was not raised in a religious household, and I'm not a person of faith. But I got that like almost every time, but I really do enjoy teaching people. And there's something about helping and mentoring and teaching people that you get this enjoyment, almost this kind of like high of seeing someone, their face light up and they've done something that they didn't think they could do. And then now you're feeling excited along with it, just like being a parent, like watching your kid do something new for the first time. It's interesting how that, like the joy, there's like this power of osmosis and it just comes through from them to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, so we're now like the market is obviously gone through. I don't know if you're aware, but the market has shifted. Did you see that? Yeah,
yeah. Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Slight wind of change.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So like a lot of peers of mine down here in our market, and I think all over the country, really, like there's been a lot like this move of a lot of LOs moving to brokers, and not everybody obviously, but that's kind of like the hot thing right now. That's like on trend. And you're someone who's in a unique position, having built up your own brokerage, and then you're now on the retail side, and so you've had success on both sides of that coin. Why are you on a retail model, and what would you say about a broker model versus a retail model, in this environment and moving forward? What are some of your thoughts on that?
I'd say a lot of it has to do with where you want to be in the future. So for those people who are watching who don't know, I used to own a mortgage company. We were a mini-correspondent, sold it at 5 years, closed it to join CrossCountry Mortgage. A lot of that was because I kept hitting the same volume every single year. And what I realized was I was doing hiring, accounting. We were funding our own loans through a bank. I mean, and I'd hired people for this, but I was constantly involved with all these things, which took me away from what I'm good at, which is the sales and recruiting loan officers and what have you. And the brokerage way to start, I don't think is terrible. And I'm sure I'm going to have some people who are going to watch this who are going to be angry that I just said that, but people that are here. But I think the problem is at some point, you're going to try to grow, and you're going to need to either hire people who are going to help you with very specific things like compliance on appraisals, or balancing books at the end of every single month and then reporting them quarterly to the powers that be. I already forgot who they go to.
Yeah, you've blocked it out.
It's a scar.
Yeah.
But I think the important part was when I made the shift in 19, and this is before COVID refi boom hit, I almost doubled my production. I went from about 54 to 92 million, because I got to focus on what I was really good at, which was making phone calls, reaching out to realtors, having happy hours, lunch and learns, all these things. And I couldn't have done it in my world. Now, there's going to be people out there going to say, I've owned a brokerage for a long time, we're doing great. That's fine. I just wasn't in a position where I could hire people at 6 figures to run this part of this department and this part of this department. And I could have gone out and gotten a loan or a partner, but I didn't want to do that. What I wanted to do was plug and play.
Yeah.
And so I joined an organization. I think the broker world lures people in times like this because there's the promise of, we have lower rates, we can close. Well, you get lower rates because margins are lower. You get lower rates because your comp is lower. Or you have borrower paid, all these things that happen in the broker world, and that's fantastic. But you're doing a lot of work for not a lot of pay.
Right.
And I mean, it's not just about money, but let's be clear. I come to work to make money to pay my mortgage, so that someday I won't have one, right? Which is crazy because I'm in the mortgage world, and maybe I should have a lot of mortgage.
Yeah. You got to use your own product, Tim.
Yeah. But to me, and most of the brokers I've ever spoken to, it feels like we get to some capped level where it's like, this is as far as you're going to grow in the world that you're in. And with retail, I found an opportunity for that not to be the case. And quite frankly, when March 2020 hit, we were already making phone calls at the end of February because you could see something was happening. The treasuries were just tanking, mortgage-backed securities were rolling down, treasury bonds yields. And I couldn't have made the money I made in 2020 had I stayed as a broker. And, that's maybe the universe helping me along in 2019 where I make that change, but I made the change. The largest refi boom in the history of this country happened, and there was no way I could have done it where I was at. And so I will thank my blessings that I had the opportunity to make the move from broker to retail. And again, there will be people who will say, Tim didn't know what he's doing or he's talking about. I'm just going to tell you, it worked for me, and I'm honest about everything that I do. And I tell these people, you can go to a broker, but I'm telling you, you're not going to be there long. You just don't get the support that you get at retail levels.
Yeah.
And that's for me being a broker for 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it makes sense, because like I'm starting to spend a lot of time doing recruiting now. And so I'm talking to a lot of loan officers and, talking to brokers and talking to retail and everybody in between. And when you look at the numbers, like when you start to look at your top producers in the state, very few brokers, you don't see a lot of big hitters in the broker world. And then like if I talk comp with brokers, who are similar to like my production level or even, a little above, they're not making what I'm making on the retail side. And
Right.
So, and then to your point, like not only just the per comp or per loan comp basis, but all the ancillary stuff you have to deal with, you really have to. It would seem like maybe if you got so big that you had this management team running everything and you were truly disconnected from it, then that could probably work and you could probably scale it. But to get to that point would seem almost impossible. And then I guess even if you're the owner of the business, how much disconnected could you really ever get from it? There's so much distraction with all the compliance and everything else that you have to deal with.
I would totally agree with that. And to that point with the management team, the expense of that, and if you're cutting your margins in slow times like now, like the majority of the industry is doing, where does that end? At some point, I've got to cut my margins, but I don't want to. So I'm going to cut my LO comp, and then those brokers are the ones that really take the hit,
right?
Because they can quote whatever they want, but to be competitive, they still have to pay for wherever they are. So as a mini correspondent, I had rent, I had all these external expenses that I had to cover, and my margins kept shrinking because what I was doing was competing over rate and not over service. And yes, I get it. Rate is super important. I mean, I would say majority of my clients I'm in the Denver metro area. They're in the South Metro, which is a lot of population that works in the Denver Tech Center or downtown. Like they have at least bachelor's degrees. A lot of them have 2 degrees. And so they will look for the best interest rate out there. But at the end of the day, I couldn't provide the service as a broker that I can here in the retail, because I can walk down the hall and yes, I can literally talk to my underwriters, and a broker I could call one too, but we weren't in it together, in my opinion. They say that you are, but in my world, we're in the same company. If we close a loan, it pays for those underwriters too. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and like you're making a phone call to someone in our region here who works with us. We're in the same group. They know us. We have long-standing relationships. We're all getting a paycheck from the same company. Like you said, we're all rowing in the same direction. And there's not somebody over here who, sends us XYZ amount of business or whatever that we have other allegiances to. It's all CCM. We're all moving in the same direction.
Exactly.
What do you think? Because I've never been on the broker side, so I'm not super familiar with that side of the business. Like I've learned a lot about it, and I know like the basics of it, but I have to wonder. I would assume that a very high percentage of wholesale lenders are heavy refi, and so now as we're going into this market with almost no refi business, if we stay with elevated rates for a sustained period of time, long enough to where mortgage companies are starting to shut doors because they don't have the business coming in, I wonder what that does to the broker world, because a lot of those wholesale lenders have got to be heavy refi for the business they're buying.
Absolutely. And honestly, when I joined one of the things Dan taught me was, you're going to refi, and that's where those are the moments you're going to make all that extra money. And sure enough, 2020 proved him correct. But at the same time, I built a huge bank of business. Just in Denver, I started here. I think I closed my first loan here in 2014, and we coming from Chicago, and I had spent a lot of time going through and finding these relationships with these realtors, and the same questions over and over and over by all of them. Do you do your own funding? Do you do underwriting, in-house? How's your processing? Where I'm at now, I've got an underwriter down the hall. My processing team is here. My funders are on the other side of it, all on the same floor.
Yeah.
And so it made selling to my real estate agents, even refinances as far as financial planners, whether we have control or not, it's about how they view it. And they view that I could walk down there and make my underwriter do something, which we all know that the minute you think you can tell an underwriter to do something, they're just going to do the opposite. Right? Hopefully no ops people are watching this.
Yeah.
But to that point, it's just, you've got to learn, if I'm going to chase a group of people that need this, then I need to figure out how to provide this to them. And then that's going to get that business. And I would agree. At the brokers, we were always heavy refi. It's hard to sell on that side. And again, if you're going to just sell on rate, that's fine. But how long can you do that for? At some point, you're not going to be able to provide a service, and you're going to lose that referral partner, because you can't go down the hall and say, let's have a real discussion about this and tell me what is it that you need from me. Whereas the broker world, they're like, here's your condition, you go do it. They're getting better in the broker world. I'm not gonna pretend like they don't, especially compared to 2005 or 6. The other side of that is when liquidity dries up, like it did in 08. I mean, one of the first things that wholesale lenders do, if they have retail branches, is pull the wholesale side away. And so you had banks that were lending money on the wholesale side for brokers who just all of a sudden one day was like, nah, that's not going to be profitable, we're out. And you had 20 lenders to sell to, and all of a sudden now I have 3. And so now your interest rates probably rise a little bit because of supply and demand.
Yeah.
And, we have investors on our end too, but when you're selling directly to Fannie and Freddie, not having to go through that wholesale lender as a broker, I think it changes a lot of things.
Yes.
For the better.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, as an originator, like I tell LOs, you never want to make a move to a company based on pricing, because pricing is constantly in flux. Even comparing mortgage banks, comparing depository banks, wholesale lenders, like depending on the market conditions and what a lender wants to do, they can adjust their margins. And so you can compare a couple companies one day and compare them 6 months, and one could be better today and one could be worse 6 months from now. It's constantly, it's fluid. But you really, and I think this applies to really any business. Like, you want to attract consumers who want to do business with you because they value what you offer as a product or a service. And there's a certain percentage of people out there who all they care about is price, and they don't care about your service. They don't care about the experience that they get with you or how good you are at what you do. They look at almost every business transaction as just kind of a commoditized transaction. I want it as cheap as possible. I don't care about my experience. That's not the ideal client that most business people want to chase, because then you're always chasing lower margins forever, right?
Forever. And by the way, those same people, when something is moving sideways, they're going to go back to being like, oh, wait, I actually did want that service. And you're like, well, but that's not what you paid for.
Right.
I mean, the joke in our industry is, you want the Walmart experience or the Nordstrom experience. And hey, I can get a lot of product for Walmart. It's cheaper. The shirt's probably going to fall apart a little bit faster maybe than the one that's been stitched for, that was made for Nordstrom specifically. It might even be the same people making the damn shirt, right? You're going to pay a little bit more over here because you're going to walk in and somebody say, how may I help you? Where Walmart's like, it's down in aisle 5, right?
Right.
And yes, I have been to Walmart.
Yeah.
Before he's like, this guy doesn't go to Walmart.
Yeah.
Calm down. I get my apples and oranges from somewhere.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, side tip here. My wife Danielle has ordered groceries from Walmart recently, and they have a pretty good grocery delivery service now. Shocking. Like the quality.
Walmart specifically, not Instacart or something.
Yeah, Walmart specifically. Awesome. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
I'm trying that.
So there's a little grocery tip for the week.
Excellent.
What does your average day look like now, Tim? What do you spend most of your time doing on a daily basis?
So I'm one of those people who works probably more hours than I would like to admit to very specific coaches, but I will, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I believe that every day needs to start with meetings. You need to know what's going on, where are the fires, what what kind of problems do I need to head off at the pass, so to speak, right? So I'm usually rolling in sometime between 7 and 7:15. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I go to the gym. So I'm up at 4:40 in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm up at 5 a.m. on Tuesday and Thursday. No matter what, I roll into the office probably by 7:10 or 7:15. About that time, making coffee, trying to, I try not to get into the email, but that's almost impossible. Just to kind of at least clean my stuff up for the day. Sit with my ops manager for usually about 20 to 30 minutes, kind of planning out the day. What types of things do we need to change? Or, how's the week being? How's the team's attitudes, if you will, as far as what's happening, which is interesting because when we were really, really busy and they thought we were crazy, and then we're really, really slow and they think we're crazy. And so we want to make sure that we're checking on that.
Yeah.
To do that, at 8:15 every morning, we have a pipeline meeting that typically lasts about 30 to 25 minutes. At that point, any of the loan officers that are in the 2 branches that I run here in Denver, we will have a conversation about anything that's pressing. So they have a file coming down the pipeline. Somebody's pre-approved in shopping. They have a question about how to structure something. We'll spend about 10 or 15 minutes on that. There's not hundreds of those people, maybe 10 to 12. And then I have my own LP1 meeting. So basically looking at what leads are coming in, who's pre-approved, who's not pre-approved. And we're going through what we call the lead tracker and just kind of going backwards and saying, what are we waiting on these people? How do we get them motivated to move a little bit faster on their pre-approval so they're not out shopping us, they're not meeting other lenders while they're, at their kids' daycare center or whatever, trying to push that. So that's kind of how that starts. That usually rolls up to about 9:15. Basically from then until lunch, on most days I'm making phone calls. So I'm either checking in on calling my realtor partners, calling new realtor referrals that we're chasing, leads rather, past clients. It's just a lot of green time on that to try to make those calls.
Yeah.
Have a lunch, usually check in with the team during that as they're going through their motions. In the afternoons, we're trying to schedule Zoom calls with new clients that are trying to get pre-approved. I will initially take those calls up front, some of that information, and push it off. My front end, what we call LP1's loan partners, do quite a bit of that now. I'm trying to take some of that back as things have been slower, just to get a little bit more involved in transactions. If not that, then I'm out knocking on doors is the next goal. So, and towards the end of the week, I really spend those phone calls more recruiting, chasing loan officers, which is that's one of my top priorities here moving forward as I start to look for how I'm going to generate wealth in 15 years, right? I mean, theoretically, I'm supposed to be retiring around 65, which sounds ridiculous, but that's in 17 years, but but probably won't retire. I think my family would just send me right back to work. But, so I don't know if I answered your question, but it's a lot of phone calls. It's a lot of, there'll be tweaks of red time in there where I can check on a file, or if somebody needs a phone call, a love call, my team is always messaging me, but there's a lot of time spent, or at least attempted to spend, either making phone calls to build relationships, schedule appointments, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. With the Zoom calls, you said Zoom calls with clients who are trying to get pre-approved. Are you doing Zoom calls with clients as like an initial point of contact?
We are. We try to schedule it right away. So if I get,
That's
let's
awesome.
say I have an introduction referral email, we have a standard email that goes right back to them and it asks if they'd like to schedule an in-person or a Zoom, because we still have, like probably everywhere, people are still a little concerned, about COVID, about being around other people. I mean, I didn't enjoy being around people before COVID, so I feel like I was a leader in that field.
Yeah. But you're in sales.
Yeah, right.
And I'm the same way.
Yeah, it's like, oh God, I got to go home and just sit on the couch.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
And drink wine.
Yeah.
So what we'll try to do is kind of get that. We really want to do, as a broker, we were always on the phone. And what I've learned is I can't see their face. I'm having to listen to, did they smile during that sentence or not? I think the Zoom is helping with collecting face-to-faces. I would prefer in person. I think you can see body language and all of those things. Whereas on the Zoom, I can still at least get some of that initial, did they lean back? Are they leaning forward? Are they interested? Do they look like they have a question? You can't hear on the phone. And so we're doing that. We've encouraged our LP1s to try to get people on those as well to do that on the Zoom call. So I think it's doing well. My team thinks it's been better. So helps.
Okay. So, and then are you guys taking an application and on that Zoom meeting? You're like taking it over the Zoom call there, or like what are you discussing in that meeting?
Yeah. So it's more about their needs, what their wants are, what are they trying to accomplish. We go through what I call the 3 threes. So we talk about debt to income ratio, loan to value, and funds to close. We've broken them down into threes so that everybody can remember, hey, remember when we talked about the 3 threes? Oh yeah, that sounds familiar. So that we're trying to break it down and go through all of that. And the goal is to get that loan application on the phone, or at least get them to agree to have us send, one of our electric forms over for their questionnaires for them to fill that out to start populating the application. Should they say, well, I got to wait for my spouse to come home, or et cetera.
Okay.
What we are trying to do is keep them on that Zoom call to get that full application and get that credit report pulled.
Okay. That's cool. I like that. 'Cause like our process, we do we call it an initial consultation. It's just like a 20-minute upfront call. It's like the needs analysis call, finding out what they're looking for, kind of giving them an idea of, okay, here's what we think we could do for you from a financing perspective. And then we're sending them the online app, having them submit it. Once that comes in and it's all pre-approved and ready to roll, then I have a Zoom consultation with the client and go through their pre-qual, what all the numbers look like, what their financing options are.
Smart.
But connecting with them Zoom up front, that just probably helps you build the relationship even tighter right out of the gate. And it's amazing how comfortable everybody is with Zoom now. Like I'm not even meeting clients face to face because Zoom just works so well. I mean, we're doing a podcast over Zoom.
Right.
Like it's just,
right.
Yeah.
2 different states.
Yeah.
Well, and I think to that point, we couldn't get people on Skype before COVID happened. And then all of a sudden everything was on Zoom.
Yeah.
I mean, we were having wine meetings with people all over the country, and we were drinking wine and discussing it with winemakers, and you're on Zoom. I mean, I did one of those in my office, and I didn't have the wine, and I just sat on there like an idiot. It was the first one I was on. I was in a t-shirt. I'm in my office, no wine. Everybody else is like, oh, I'm on the beach in Virginia. And somebody's like, oh, I'm out here in Scottsdale on the golf course. I'm like, I'm in my office with no wine. So, but anyway, so to the point, right? Like everybody all of a sudden is like okay with it. And so a lot of times you're getting a lot of, that'll work or whatever. And they're in their home and I'll say, oh, what do you, you can see behind them. So I think in the sales, we're always supposed to be looking for something. And, if I go to a real estate office, I can sit and be in a real estate agent's office and see this award or that. Or I'm like, oh, tell me about that. Right. And so if they're on the Zoom, I'm always looking like what's behind them. What's important? Why did they pick this spot in their apartment or house or whatever? And why is this important? Hey, tell me about this. You've got this weird bear thing on, behind you. What is that about? Right. And it gets them that being personal before professional.
I like that. That's a great tactic. I haven't done that before. That makes a lot of sense. Like now you're opening up a personal conversation with somebody based on what you're seeing in the Zoom meeting. Right. Yeah.
Well, and I think, they may pick it because it's the kitchen table, but sometimes they're like, well, no, I set this up and it's my office. Like if you look in my office, I've got helmets on here because I love football. And so I've got like where I went to school, where my dad went to school, my NFL team, like people who are in my office should be asking about that. And if you do, you've got my attention, right? So then I'm trying to do the opposite.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great tactic for everybody because it's weird how technology is changing the way that we're interacting with people in terms of like the method of how we're doing it. Like face-to-face can now be done over Zoom, but it doesn't mean that face-to-face is any less important because there's still all the social cues like you were mentioning. And so much verbal communication is done through people's body language and their facial expressions. And when you're on the phone with someone, you're missing that whole part of the communication between you and them. But you don't physically have to be together to get that part of the communication now with tools that we have at our disposal.
Right. To your point, the face-to-face, I can't shake hands over Zoom. And what I have found over time, especially having gone back to seminars and doing these things externally we didn't do for so long, is that when I shake somebody's hand, I've realized I actually touch their shoulder. And, maybe that I probably can't do that in the office because I'll get fired or something. But I think
Tim touched me.
Yeah, Tim touched me. Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But if there's something to be said about that, and if somebody shakes my hand and touches my shoulder, I'm like, oh, right. There's like this caring aspect of the touch. And I know some people don't like that, but I think the majority of us, it's just like they talk about shaking the hand and putting your hand over their other hand, so it's an embrace of the handshake, right? Sort of thing. And you can't do that on Zoom.
Yeah.
You can't do it on texting, by the way, people. I've got a loan officer and that's how he runs his whole business. I'm like, did you get the email? And he was like, oh, hold on. And he pulls up his phone and says, I'm like, you have 2 monitors right here. Look at the email on this big giant screen. Nope, let's look at it like this. Yes, I'm old. I know people are like, oh, this old guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
No, we're so programmed into our phones now. It's crazy. It's like we're addicted to our phones like they're crack.
Yeah.
What do you So we've been part of a coaching program together and been around a lot of top producers. You're a top producer. For someone who is either trying to be a top producer in the mortgage business or any other business, like what do you see that separates the highest level producers from the lower tier producers?
I think honestly, it just comes down to grind, and it's a tough word. And yes, there are days I wake up and I'm like, nope, not going to grind today, But then I see how the day plays out, and I realize I should have done more. And I think that when we changed the I should have done more to I did do more, that really was what propelled my business. And it was being around these top producers. They were like, why don't you do this? And I'm like, well, that sounds hard. And they're like, well, I do it every day. And you're like, yeah, but you're a top producer. Oh, right. You used to not be. Okay. I'm a slow learner, starting to catch on.
Yeah.
Remember, I snuck into my college. So, I think that's really what it comes down to. Like I said, when I started, the real estate agent said, go meet 500 real estate agents in 3 months. And what a daunting task on June 1st when I started,
Yeah.
By the end of that, I had met so many people and that was in my first year. I started in 04. And so, I probably made, I don't know, 17 or 18,000. Just so everybody knows, I had been in trucking for 10 years. I cashed out a 401k that had maybe 30,000 in it, blew through all of that.
Wow.
The next 12 months, I made 6 figures. And I think that it was all because I made those calls.
Yeah.
And what I stopped doing as I moved forward was continuing to chase those open houses and those phone calls. And even as a top producer, this year is tough. And so will I do what I did the last couple of years? No. But I'm not going to stop the grind. I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to go do some open houses on Saturday, and I'll walk in and I'll probably see real estate agents I know. And they're like, why are you doing this? They're like, because I am not ready to retire. I'm not ready to go quietly into that dark night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I honestly think that's what it is. I think that everybody sees this daunting task in front of them and they say, that seems too hard. So I'll do the minimum. And hey, let's be honest, in this career, you don't have to be a top producer to make tons of money, right?
Yeah.
Depending on your loan size and how much volume, you could make 3 or 4 deals a month and be 6 figures. And that is a great life. I just chose that I decided that I wanted to be a little bit more than that. And so that means I had to do a little bit more work. And when I started to see the success, it was like, oh, well, I'll just double that or do more. And you would see these things start to come through and follow through. So I'm going to stick with grind on that. I think that and probably believing in yourself. Because I know those grinds you go through, you call 20 realtors, nobody answers the phone, and you're like, this sucks. And call them again anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you like? What's motivating you to do that at this stage of your career? What are you chasing? What is your carrot that you're going for, and what's getting you up at 4:30 in the morning when you're going into the office at 7:15?
I need $100 million to buy a winery. That's what I figured out so far. That's a tall order. There's my grind. I've actually struggled with this question. 2020 and 2021 were a gift, and we were very highly motivated to get through as my team and get rewarded. And I struggled with this a little bit earlier in the year, and I've really had to focus on what my purpose was, because as I said earlier, it's not really so much about necessarily the money anymore. So I have a 3-year-old son at my age. He was sort of we had challenges to get to him. And so he is a blessing from the universe. And when I say blessing, he is a holy terror right now. So if you ever had a 3-year-old, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I've had 2 of them.
Oh God.
Yeah.
So, so in my life, I start thinking, how is he going to see me? He's not going to see 2020 dad. He's not going to see 2021 dad. He was 1 and 2 years old. He's not even going to see me this year. He's going to see me in 5 or 6 years. And either I can be coasting through life. What is he going to learn from that? I learned how to work hard for my parents. And like I said, I didn't come from a great family, but I learned work ethic. Like we were building fences when I was 7. For people, I don't even know why we were building a fence. I didn't have a fence. I don't even know where this fence was, but I remember doing it and chopping down trees. We didn't have any trees. We lived, like in our yard. But I got this hard work ethic, and I realized like these things need to be passed down by generation. I just think there's a lost art to making people actually have to struggle to get to something to feel that reward. And I need him to see that no matter how he feels, like he's growing up in a really nice home, I mean, I'm not driving Ferraris, but I've got a GMC, and like, these are nice vehicles and they're paid off. But that's not real life, right? Like, that's not where I came from. I wasn't handed a damn thing. And I need him to understand he's not going to either. So son, if you're listening to this in the future, that money ain't yours. Yeah. So I plan on spending all of it. Yeah. Anyway. So I think that motivates me. And honestly, the 440 thing, like, people are like, well, that's early. Like, maybe Tim can do it. I hate working out. I'm actually starting to like it now, which is ridiculous. But I don't like getting up early, and I am cranky. But I realize if I get up and I go work out, my son is going to see that too. And there's diabetes in my family. I'm the only one that I know of right now that doesn't have it, knock on wood. But I need to make sure that he understands, like, oh, we get up, we work out, we have a healthy lifestyle, we eat, vegetables, all these things. And he's already observing me, because if I drop an F-bomb, he tells me that's not allowed, right? So, and if you're in lending, you're dropping F-bombs.
Yeah, a lot of F-bombs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's really my motivation, is I need for him to see that life is not easy, but you can be successful as long as you push yourself. And therefore, I mean, when he's 18, I'll be, 65. So I got a long way to go.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, it is amazing how much kids observe. They're always listening. Our kids are 7 and 5. And even when they're in the playroom, like playing, or they're 20 feet away from us, like focused on doing whatever they're doing, and you think they're not paying attention, they're listening to every word. They just see everything that you do. And like, I like to go to the gym. I don't know, for some reason I like working out. It's this weird thing where it's like, I don't like it, but I like being done with it. I don't know. It's just, yes. So like, I've always gone. Yeah. And that's just been a routine of mine for a long time. And my wife, Danielle, likes to work out too. So our kids, like, I can remember at about your child's age, about 3 years old, they want to work out. They're not even sure why they're working out, but they just know they want to do it because their parents are doing it. So it's amazing how much what we do influences who our kids become, what they want. It's like they just absorb it and then take it on without even a choice in it, really. It's just they automatically start doing it. It's crazy. It's amazing to watch it.
Yeah. So 5 and 7.
Yeah.
So the chaos ended, or it's just like on a hiatus until teenage years? Or...
Yeah. It's like a different type of chaos. Like now, like when
it's still chaos.
Oh, it's still chaos.
I gotta get my mindset.
Yeah. Oh no, it's just chaos in a different form. Because like when they're 2, 3, 4, you're constantly chasing them around, just making sure they don't kill themselves. So you're always having to watch them and just follow them and be there to like grab them if they get something, or keep everything away so that they can't get into stuff they shouldn't. Yeah. And then they get like 5, 6, 7. And then it becomes like more of a mental battle. Like they have their own opinions on everything. And they're like, our son, he's really had like an anger management issue that we've been working through. He just blows up off the handle for like no reason. Like, dude, what is going on? Like, why are we like throwing a fit over this? And then
that's from Danielle's side of the family?
No, that's from me. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm in lending. Yeah.
You gotta throw her under the bus. She'll watch it.
Yeah. Like that. Yeah. No, it's definitely from me. Definitely for me. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. So it's all those kinds of things. And then, or even just getting a word in, like when we're at the dinner table now, like I'll come home, like I try and get home so that we can eat dinner together. But for Danielle and I to even catch up on our day, it's hard because the kids they want to talk. So it's interesting. Yeah. It's all, I feel like it's always changing into some kind of different phase in their development.
Awesome.
Well, one final question for you, Tim. What's like one thing that you know now that you wish you would have known 10 years ago?
This is going to sound super core, but calling status updates on Tuesdays to agents, telling people where things are at. I mean, it's ridiculous how dumb it was that I didn't do this my whole career. It was somebody had to tell me, and I was like, well, that's brilliant. They're like, yeah, no, it's not. It's actually, this is the low hanging fruit. And you're like, oh my God. Yeah. So I think it comes down to communication. And I think I could say, if it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, Tim, I guess 40 years ago, Tim, is to say, I should have communicated better. Whether that was my referral partners, friends, wife, whatever. I think just being open about things is probably a really good way to go through life. And yeah, it makes you vulnerable, I started writing a Tuesday market update. Do you get that?
Yeah. It's
Just
amazing, by the way. My team loves the Tuesday market update.
crazy.
That's like their favorite part of the week. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I started kind of writing it out. Like I would complain about whatever administration was in office. I would complain about the Fed. And then I took a course with Rene Rodriguez. That's a plug for him. Super amazing. Basically said, stop coughing all the time because that's my nervous habit. And then said, tell a story, be vulnerable. And that was in January. And so my market updates have changed a little bit where I've told stories. I have a picture of my kid, or like today I basically lectured everybody about, I'm sure it was something, anger, hostility. I don't even remember anymore.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there was a little bit in there. Yep.
Yeah, it kind of flows. But
yeah.
I realized that I have a gift of, in my opinion, of speech and to help. And if I can share some of the pain that I've gone through in my life, maybe I can help somebody else either avoid it or get through whatever they're going through.
Yeah.
And then of course I tie it back in, because if I'm in pain, it's probably because Jerome Powell's done something at the Fed. And so then I'm just going to tie that right back in, right?
Yeah.
But I think that communication's been strong. And if I been a little bit more vulnerable earlier in my life, I might have made better long-term relationships. And from a business perspective, that may have propelled my income. It may have propelled my business. It may have propelled my team. It may have propelled my region, all the people around me. And so I'm trying to do a better job of that now. And so I'm telling people out there, if you're younger, don't be afraid to share your stories. Yes, somebody will laugh. Cool. They're not your friend. Bye. Peace.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, you're going to find those right people. Like, that's how we met. Jeff was here on an interview. And I think at one point Gavin walked out of the office and I said something to him. I was like, I got some problems on board.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm going to share that. I was like, you told him this? I was like, yes, I told him this.
Yeah. That proved to be correct, actually.
So, but I think vulnerability and communicating is probably the number one. I had written something down earlier because I had this question ahead of time, obviously, but it was probably grind or making phone calls. No, I think the communication, because if you're communicating, you're vulnerable, you're not going to have such a hard time picking up the phone and calling people that you don't know, because that's a vulnerable thing to do.
Yes. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. It's amazing how much of life, like everything in life, comes down to communication, because we're in a world with 7 billion people. We're constantly interacting with other people. We're all interconnected. Like if you can't communicate, you can't have good personal relationships. You can't be a good parent if you're a parent. You can't be successful in business. And it's what you said with being vulnerable. That's hard for a lot of people to do. It's a hard thing to do because you're exposing yourself to criticism or getting hurt or whatever, and that's a hard thing for your ego. I know I struggle with that from time to time, but I would agree too with the Tuesday status updates. Giving everybody in the transaction update on Tuesdays is the simplest thing. It is like magic. It's unbelievable. It's magic. I mean, I look at all my best agents. Every single one of them, except for one, was a listing agent who I was calling on Tuesdays, and then I got a coffee appointment with them after the transaction. It's just,
and it's not rocket science.
No,
we just don't. But the problem is we're not thinking about it, because to your point with the ego, we're thinking about, how's this impacting me? How do I get this done? How do I get this done? And we're not thinking, how is this helping someone else? And the minute we start to do that, I think the rewards come.
Yeah, that's it. Adding value for other people, helping other people. And then all of a sudden they're in your world and they're wanting to be around you because you're helping them get better.
Right. Amen.
Well, Tim, thank you. I know you're a super busy guy, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast here. This is something I'm excited about launching, and to have someone at your level sharing your knowledge and what you're doing is awesome. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Jeff, talk about vulnerable. You're doing a podcast. Like, this is super impressive. Something I've worked on. I think we may have some similar coaching that we're working on with Richard.
Yeah.
And some of these things that we're trying to build, and I've been a little bit slower, and to be able to participate on this and see you doing this, it allows me to realize, hey, if Jeff can do it. No.
Yeah, it's true. If I can do it, you definitely can do it.
But I think that it's just amazing what you're doing here, and I hope you keep it up for a long time. And if you need me back in the future, or to drag people in here and you can interview them, you let me know, because I think what you're doing is going to pay dividends, and I'm proud of you.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it, brother. Well, you have a good rest of your week. Thank you for taking the time.
Happy to do so. Thanks, Jeff.